I don't know if you just caught that false start, but I had to swap out batteries and I had to change my spectacles. Malfunctions on both. So as I was saying, I'm going to give two talks this month. The second one will be from the Facebook page of the San Francisco Lodge of the Theosophical Society, and that will be a purely mystical talk, also based on Secret Engine of the World. But this talk, and then I think it'll be the 20th, Sunday the 20th. And this talk is both mystical and political, and so I'm delivering it from my personal Facebook page. And so I hope you join me for the next half hour or so. The need for this presentation arose from recent developments relating to three of the um, numerous themes I explored in Secret Engine of the World. Uh, what I call STDs, what I call CADs, and what I addressed as the problem of men. And then of course, as I always do whenever I speak about this current book, Secret Engine of the World, I'm going to address the three deadlines that we face, the two deadlines we face as a nation, and the third deadline that we face as a species. So that's just kind of context for what we're going to go through this evening. So STDs, I coined the term spiritually transmitted diseases, STDs, in one of the talks I included in Secret Engine. STDs are like viruses. People become carriers and they spread them. These STDs undermine your spiritual health, your mystical health. They lead you to waste your precious time here on this earth in this incarnation. So I offered an example of one of these STDs, which I called the usurper, and three of its variants. It's funny to talk about it now because this was all pre-pandemic, right? It's like maybe 2019 or something like that. So I offered an example of one STD, the usurper, and three of its variants. One of the variants was a table of erroneous correspondences. For example, uh, masculine does not correspond to sun, and female does not correspond to moon, and nor does dark correspond to evil, and light correspond to good. Table of false correspondences. Another one was disempowering memes. For example, whatever you resist persists. Yes, but it's a wrong prescription in many circumstances, and a wrong prescription can be dangerous. And then another one was a big picture perversion, which an example of which would be, oh, the divine authorship of everything. So no, Hitler's extermination of the Jews was not an expression of the divine will, nor the Rwandan genocide. It was not an expression of the divine will. It's all a oneness, but no, it isn't. Two opposite truths occupy the same space. That's the divine paradox. Without having a relationship to the divine paradox, it can't go anywhere in the mystical journey, the journey into the mystical dimensions of our life here and of this world. So then tonight I want to introduce two new STDs, or two STDs that I have newly identified. One is called the disassociator. The disassociator. And this STD separates you from your true identity. An example of the disassociator is, I am not my body. We see this pervasively promoted in religion, mysticism, yoga, meditation, etc. It is a perversion. It is a truncation of a deeper, subtler truth. It is kind of a violence against one's primal reality. I am not my body, comma. It's the beginning of a long sentence. It's not a closed, definitive statement. It's been, as I said, very, very perverted and pervasive in spiritual, religious teachings. Another example of the disassociator is the patriarchal gender binary of male and female. The patriarchal gender binary of male and female. In other words, the patriarchal view of what the female role is and the patriarchal view of what the male role is. And this disassociates you from your primal reality as a human being. This mold, in other words, they saying, this is masculine, this is feminine, this is the divine masculine, this is the divine feminine. This mold given to you, imposed upon you by the patriarchy, is what you are. This mold is what you are supposed to be. This is what a man is. This is what a woman is supposed to be. Thus saith the colonizer. Thus saith the oppressor, the pimps of patriarchy. Eviscerator is the other STD I want to just briefly touch on tonight. Name, call out. Eviscerator. And the eviscerator separates you from your reservoirs of power. The eviscerator separates you from your reservoirs of power. For example, a cable news segment on climate emergency. And the overwhelming consensus among scientists says yes. Over 95% of scientists say yes. But the segment, the cable news segment, will be framed as a debate with the naysayers representing less than 5% at best of all scientists, treated equally. Like two equal and opposing points of view, treated with equal gravitas. That's insane. Another example of the eviscerator, separating you from your power, separating you from the power of fact, the power of reality, the power of a truth, of fact. Separating you from the reservoir of fact. Another example is surrenderitis, what I call surrenderitis. As if surrender is always holier, always the wiser choice, always the holier choice, and that will, defiance, etc. are somehow a lesser way. This truth, but the truth is situational. It depends in some circumstances. One applies in another circumstance, different circumstance, the other applies. Sometimes will is called for, sometimes surrender is called for, sometimes the divine paradox is in play, and both are called for in a way that is almost inexplicable. But surrenderitis is this eviscerates you. It eviscerates you. It separates you from the reservoir of your power. Separates from you from your will. The understanding that you can exercise your will. That your will, too, is an expression of divine power. Personal power as an expression of divine power. So disassociator and eviscerator weaken one's alignment with reality. our common reality, the reality of shared facts and observable laws of nature. And they disrupt one's experiential ground in one's own primal reality, the reality of one's being, one's five bodies, one's karma and dharma. Disassociator and eviscerator take us out of ourselves and away from the world as it really is. Also, along with STDs in Secret Engine of the World, I also coined the phrase CADS, cognitive atrophy and dissolution syndrome. Cognitive atrophy and dissolution syndrome. I had been pondering both the personal and societal impact of succeeding generations who had been experiencing a baseline receding, continually receding from physical reality, from one's own creative imagination, from one's own reasoning skill. So the first baseline, television. The second baseline, video games, and then the internet, and finally the smartphones. I had been feeling, and social media, I had been feeling a weakening in people's intellectual capacity and autonomy. So I started formulating this notion of CADS as a syndrome. And in certain social media circles, I had felt this weakening was further aggravated by powerful influences within some of the subcultures in which we travel as yogis and artists and meditators and adventurers. Social media itself, Facebook and the Gram, Neo-Tantra, the Neo-Tantra subculture, the misuse of plant medicine, the abuse and misuse of plant medicine, the experience, the after glow of the experience of Burning Man and the festival scene in general. All of these elements, technical innovations, all of these explorations of psyche and soma, wonderful, freeing, mind expanding, accelerating. But they also brought unintended consequences when taken together. Many people were, I felt, starting to lose their minds. Literally starting to lose their minds, starting to lose their sense of reality. But then, this was a talk I gave, again, prior to the pandemic, prior to Trump. Well, in the first couple of years of Trump and before the pandemic. So then factor in 4 years of a pathologically ill man in control of the bully pulpit. Factor in what has become one of the two major political parties in the world's dominant democracy falling into authoritarianism. Factor in the collapse of the ecological and climatic balance which civilization itself is predicated upon. Factor in 2 or 3 years of a global pandemic. And now we are dealing with a massive collective delusion that threatens to engulf significant swaths of the population. Consider QAnon. Quote, a secret cabal is taking over the world. They kidnap children, slaughter and eat them to gain power from their blood. They control high positions in government, banks, international finance, the news media, and the church. They want to disarm the police. They promote homosexuality and pedophilia. They plan to mongrelize the white race so it will lose its essential power. Does this conspiracy theory sound familiar? It is. The same narrative has been repackaged by QAnon. I have studied and worked to prevent genocide for 40 years. This is Gregory Stanton writing on a great website, Just Security. I have studied and worked to prevent genocide for 40 years. Genocide Watch and Alliance Against Genocide, the first international anti-genocide coalition, see such hate-filled conspiracy theories as early warning signs of deadly genocidal violence. The plot described above was the conspiracy revealed in the most influential anti-Jewish pamphlet of all time. It was called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. It was written by Russian anti-Jew propagandists around 1902. That format, that narrative, that fantasy, that nightmare, paranoid fantasy it's the essence of QAnon happening now in the United States of America and in Western countries. Who spreads it? Well, that's a complex answer, but I'll give you one clue. This is from Reuters, November. All these links will be in this the printed version, the online version of this talk. You'll be able to look all this stuff up. Reuters, November 2020. The Russian government-backed social media accounts nurtured the QAnon conspiracy theory in its infancy, earlier than previously reported, according to interviews with current and former Twitter executives and archives of tweets from suspended accounts. Consider the anti-vaxxer movement. There are two virulent strains of anti-vaccination delusion, forgive me. There's the MAGA strain, the Trumpian strain, the right-wing strain, which impacts our governance and the body politic in dangerous and destructive ways. And there is the woo-woo strain, what I call the woo-woo strain, which infects the realms of the wellness and alternative lifestyles, subcultures. Look, let me break it down for you. Vaccines are blessings. Vaccines are a blessing that result from a profound collaboration between human genius, epitomized by science, and the unspeakable, incomprehensible intelligence of Gaia herself, because these bodies, after all, are her creation. The vaccines carry a message from human genius into the body and deliver that message to the divine intelligence of Gaia, organizing and operating this physical body, this energetic body. And Gaia responds accordingly and works with the vaccines to save human life. If you are fully vaccinated, including the booster, and you wear a real mask, and you exercise common sense social distancing, you have a high degree of protection against getting infected, a high degree of protection against communicating the disease to others, and an even higher degree of protection against hospitalization, and almost 100% protection against death, period, full stop. And yes, Putin has been promoting the anti-vax disinformation in the West as well. Wall Street Journal, March 2021. Russian intelligence agencies have mounted a campaign to undermine confidence in Pfizer Inc. and other Western vaccines using online publications in recent months have questioned the vaccine's development and safety. An official with the State Department's Global Engagement Center, which monitors foreign disinformation efforts, identified 4 publications that he said have served as fronts for Russian intelligence. Consider the big lie. Consider the big lie. I'll read you a tweet. I never thought I would say this, but let me read you a tweet from my ally, Representative Liz Cheney, Republican of Wyoming. The 2020 presidential election was not stolen. Anyone who claims it was is spreading the big lie, turning their back on the rule of law and poisoning our democratic system. Lisa Lerer and Nicholas Fandon, writing in the New York Times in July 2021. Behind the Republican embrace of disinformation is a calculus of both ambition and self-preservation. Beware the power of the big lie. As it threatens to overwhelm the truth, it prefigures the advent of fascist authoritarianism and the death of liberty. And last tweet I'll read you tonight is from the Joycelyn Benson, the Secretary of State, Democratic Secretary of State of Michigan, Secretary of State from Michigan. She writes, "The big lie is no longer about overturning the last presidential election. It's about planting seeds to overturn the next one." So I started noticing CADs. I saw these ways in which I could detect CADs among people as I moved through social circles. That was 2, 3, 4 years ago. Now I've just read to you 3 huge delusions. QAnon, the anti-vaxxer movement in both its styles, both of its subspecies, if you will, and the big lie about the 2020 election. These delusions, these are instances of a kind of collective, a mass psychosis. I want to drop in one more. On Facebook, you see a lot of different ways of framing reality arise. And a lot of undercurrents. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of beauty and truth and a lot of toxicity. I want to offer you a glimpse into another one of the poisonous delusions that can be found spreading in the fever swamps that dot our social media landscape. It's something called the neopolarity or female submission movement. This poisonous delusion is made possible by rampant STDs and what I call late stage CADs. The premise is that men are naturally dominant and superior to women. I'm serious now. If you go down your if you're my friend on Facebook and you go down your Facebook friends list, you will find people linked to some of these pages. The premise is that men are naturally dominant and superior and women are naturally submissive and kept, well, as vessels of Eros only, really. Although they would deny this characterization, it's the truth of it. Of course, the languaging, it isn't troglodyte languaging. It isn't MAGA languaging. It isn't right-wing languaging of Christian fundamentalist languaging. No, the languaging, it's all wrapped up in woo-woo, uh, calibrated to seduce women of the wellness subculture, calibrated to seduce women of, who might have an addiction to what I call Rumi porn, mystical poetry, loosely translated. But really, it's what I call deep orc psyops, really. And it offers an apt segue to my update on the problem with men, which is next. But here are some posts from this movement, this neo-polarity or female submission movement. Here are some posts from the movement's leaders. No, I'm not going to mention their names. Warning. What follows is as ugly and ill as any excerpt from Mein Kampf or the Turner Diaries. Look it up. If you don't want to scan it, just look for the all clear note below. Again, this will all be in the script online. First, a few aphorisms from one of this delusional movement's male leaders. Quote, "The dominant man is master of comporting himself around women who wear no armor, because he is the reason they don't have to. Only when a man becomes dominant can he be devoted to a woman. Emasculated men are too much in their feelings to be devoted." The devotion of the emasculated man enables the trauma of the masculinized woman. Her wounds lead because he doesn't know how. Men are not dominant. When men are not dominant, women become neurotic. Can you hear that's the end of those quotes. Can you hear the sickness in these formulations? How twisted, how perverse. Now listen to some of the poison posts from one of this movement's female leaders. Quote, "A woman cannot spiritually repair her relationship to men, money, or God." The Holy Trinity. Men, money, or God, the energetic trinity of the masculine, without erecting him within first. Until she can activate and hold the imprint of the masterful father principle within her own system, she so often unconsciously magnetizes vortexes of re-traumatization, which then only corroborates the incomplete, distorted narrative of the toxic masculine. However, it is only when she can open to the full penetration and cosmic ejaculatory thrust of the energetic imprint of the masculine that she can begin to receive and live the life of her heart's desire. Remember, devotion only flows upward. So it just may be the dark gift of being chosen to love a man who is in all dimensional metrics better than you could just be the most sublime, ego-detonating, eros-drenching, relentlessly orgasmic golden ticket to devotional ecstasy known to womankind. Unquote. All clear. I won't be quoting any more of this. I just needed you to get a sense of it. And yes, as incredible as it might seem to you, some of our STD-ridden, CADS positive Facebook friends and Instagram followers have fallen for this orc psyops. I was struck by how many mutual friends, I mean, when I say how many, I'm not less than the fingers on, less than my 10 fingers, but that's a lot. I mean, that's a lot. I was struck by how many mutual friends I shared with the movement leaders that I audited. And yes, some, perhaps most of those mutual friends are just indulging in morbid curiosity or suffering from a bout of both-siderism. And yes, maybe some are just a little orc curious. But wow. It is unsustainable, of course. It will implode. It will get ugly. Sources tell me it already is. But wow. My friend and ally, Dakini poet and oracle, Maya Luna, she's at the cutting edge of feminist mysticism. She really is. And I asked her to provide, she's encountered all of this, and I asked her to provide some context, since I know she's encountered some of this. Some of the trolls and sympathizers of this movement in the course of her work. She responded, quote, I would call it an attempted interference in the ascendancy of the feminine through the exaltation of patriarchalized femininity, a resurgence of misogynistic abuse paradigms and trauma bonding dressed up as divine union, unquote. Yes. This is to be expected, of course, the arising of such powerful, dangerous delusions. It's all part of a savage backlash. We are already dealing with a savage backlash at a societal level. The patriarchy is fast losing its grip on the vertical and the horizontal, and so it is increasingly violent. As the desperation intensifies, its rage intensifies. This is an inexorable process. In 2020, we were talking about, we were celebrating removing the statues, celebrating Robert E. Lee and other traitorous leaders of the slaver rebellion known as the Confederacy. We were dancing in the streets as these statues were taken away. Well, now it's 2022. And Toni Morrison's Beloved and Margaret Atwood's Handmaid's Tale are being banned in schools in MAGA-controlled states. This is the great battle of our time, and it is ongoing. Misogyny, racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, transphobia, all of it is of a whole cloth, and that whole cloth must be ripped to shreds. I have much to say about misogyny and racism in particular. I've been pondering it, but I'm not going to go into that here and now because I want to stay on message and keep going. To wit, let me just check the time. I'm wondering if I should do this in two parts. Well, let's just keep going. So the ascendancy of the feminine, human and divine, has been one of the several overarching themes in my writing. The others, altruism and sustainability as spiritual and existential imperatives. I speak about the ascendancy of the feminine extensively, both in words and dragon, and I extend it with comments about the problem of men, the problem with men in Secret Engine of the World, and I want to take it a little farther in this update. The magnitude of the problem of men, the full scope, the planetary scale, it is not dealt with adequately. It is a profound problem. Perhaps the most profound of all, it is an existential threat. If left unchallenged, unmitigated, uninterrupted, it will be the end of us, our species, our world. This is not hyperbole. I'm deathly serious. The problem with men, I articulated some in the problem with men, I articulated some remedies. But here I want to put a new emphasis on it and in a bigger frame. 3 points. First, men in general, as a gender, almost all men individually, need an intervention. Just as you would with a friend or a loved one with an addiction or a serious mental issue, men need some tough love. They need to hear a harsh truth. They need to face something grim and painful, our nation's wealth, Our nation's wealth derived from slavery. Our nation's land was won through genocide. The White House itself was built by slaves. It is not all we are or all that we have come from, not at all, but it is real, and it must be acknowledged and kept present in our psyches until we go much deeper into the transformation of and healing of our society, our body politic, our economic order. All white Americans have to come to terms with these historical facts and understand our responsibility to all of the pain, to add all of the pain and suffering caused and all of the privilege bestowed. Similarly, all men across the planet, the whole male gender, must come to realize that our position in the world as men is derived from the subjugation of women under this false pretext of the gender roles imposed by patriarchy, from the brainwashing of women, from the exploitation of women, from the imposition of a false binary of masculine and feminine, which only serves the need of the patriarchy, not of any woman, not really of any man. It is a curse on us all, a savage wound, a mutilation of us all. Men need to come to grips with the historical and psychological facts that by birth all men are complicit until they prove themselves to be otherwise. All men should welcome a recognition of our collective guilt and shame, just like white privilege. Male privilege is an injustice and an illness, and it must be revealed, disrupted, and dismantled. 2. Where you need to find the feminine, the goddess, first and foremost, where you need to bow to it. This is to men I'm speaking. Where you need to bow to it and surrender to it is inside your own psyche and soma. And I don't mean, running around Burning Man in a tutu. I mean inside your psyche and your soma. I don't mean feminizing some part of yourself based on the false binary of masculine and feminine, ginned up to serve the patriarchy. Beyond the table of consequences, yes, begin to live from emotional intelligence, from creativity, from agape, from conscience, from interconnectivity, from vibration, from authenticity in your feelings and states, from holy rage, which is not a rage, it's not a rage based on identity or possessions. Yes, it's a holy rage. Live from a more sensitive, present, aware alignment. Live from and into intimacy. The way to truly worship her is to find her inside yourself and resource her power in your daily life. 3. Other men cannot help you. This is vital to know. What you need to get in terms of help, in terms of acquiring inner technologies, in terms of learning languages differently, what you need in terms of counsel, it can only truly come from women. Female psychotherapists, female yoga teachers. Men can't help you, of course. Many women can't help you as well, but you have to, it has to be from the feminine. And it has to be, I said in The Problem with Men and Secret Engine, I said, no more male teachers for 100 years, for 1,000 years, I mean it. No more male therapists for 100 years, 1,000 years, I mean it. When 100 female therapists, you're still going to have to find a real therapist. They're not all real therapists. They're not all great yoga teachers, but you'll find them. As we accelerate into the great shift and move inexorably to supplant this rotten patriarchal civilization with a vibrant feminist civilization, I'm going to leave this cautionary note here and hope you heed the admonishment. I say, be an evolutionary, not an ideologue. What do I mean? I'm all for feminism being a political ideology. I think it should be approached ideologically in many aspects of our struggle and of our living and of our evolution. But I mean, in terms of the legacy of the human race, the legacy of civilization moving forward as we transfer from history into herstory. I encourage you to be an evolutionary, not an ideologue. What do I mean by that? I mean to hold space for Chopin and hold space for Rothko and hold space for Botticelli and Coltrane, hold space for those great artists who carried truth and beauty forward through the many bloody ignorant centuries of male dominant culture. The great paintings, the great musical compositions, the great artistic treasures of the past 2 millennia, some of them actually offered a durable container for the evidence of the deep feminine, even as we pass through the ugliest of eras, sometimes even in spite of the toxicity of the artists themselves, for example, Picasso or Wagner. Their spaces, their space in the galleries and on the playlists will be limited as culture turns over. But those that carry actual truth and beauty should always have a place. Another example of being an evolutionary instead of an ideologue is when it comes to uh, the deepest mystical teachings of the last 2,000 years, 3,000 years. Learn to discern the difference between the mystical secrets of the human race and the perverse patriarchal trappings with which they have been enmeshed and encrusted down through the many centuries. A friend once enthusiastically sent me an excerpt from a book she was devouring. It was a feminist takedown of the patriarchal age and spirituality. The excerpt was an attempt at a critique of Buddha's fundamental teachings. It was ridiculous. Of course, it was ridiculous. It was an ideological attack launched against a religionist misinterpretation of what Gautama Buddha's actual teachings are. Both the ideological attack and the religionist misrepresentation were, by definition, bounded within the mind, and all of Buddha's message was and is beyond mind. As I have said over and over again for decades now, Gautama Buddha was not a Buddhist and Jesus Christ was not a Christian. Go after the patriarchal religions that have imprisoned our great truths. Yes, please. The monasteries, the priesthoods, the patriarchal languaging, sift through it all, weigh it all, judge it all of it. Put an end to all exploitation and subjugation east and west. But leave Gautama Buddha to Pema Chodron. She is better equipped to sort it out and break it down for you. And then the third example of what I mean by evolutionary, not ideologue, is that there are three powerful myths bring forth the collective psyche to the end of the patriarchy and the threshold. They're Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, and Star Wars. Taken together, they constitute an opening into the great shift. They are portals, yes. They are told from within the patriarchal framework, yes. They are wrapped in the trappings of kingdoms and told as tales of great warriors down through the ages. But there is so much more at work in these three myths. They herald the feminist civilization to come. They carry the energy of the deep feminine. They are steeped in it. Lord of the Rings begins with the highest of the high elven sorceresses speaking from inside the oneness of the five bodies of the great green goddess Gaia herself. The world has changed. I feel it in the water. I feel it in the earth. I smell it in the air. Much that once was is lost, and none now live who remember it. The power of Gaia and Tara course through the whole of the saga. The tree shepherd, giants, the Ents marching to war to defend the ancient forests from ecocidal violence. The elves of Rivendell arriving unexpectedly at Helm's Deep in the darkest hour to stand with Theoden against the genocidal violence of the orcs. All moved by agape, all moved by conscience and the common good. In the Council of Elrond, as the kings and warriors argue amongst themselves as to the best course of action, it is Frodo, a hobbit, the smallest, gentlest, unarmed, the smallest, gentlest among them. He stands up and he says, I will take the ring, though I do not know the way. Both Frodo and Harry Potter sign up for self-sacrifice and almost certain death in desperate attempts to save all they love. Agape is the banner. Love is the deepest, oldest, most powerful medicine. Dumbledore reveals this to Harry in the Order of the Phoenix. Dumbledore reminds him again in the Half-Blood Prince. Yes, just love, Dumbledore said. The hidden truth of the Force is that it's both light and dark, both yin and yang, swirling within and all around each other. They are the circle of life itself. Evil is outside the circle. Luke says to Rey, breathe, reach out with your feelings. What do you see? The island, life, death, decay, new life, warmth, cold, peace, violence, Luke. And between it all, Rey, balance and energy, a force, Luke. Inside of you, Rey, inside of me, the same force, Luke. And this is the lesson. That force does not belong to the Jedi. To say that if the Jedi die, the light dies, is vanity. Can you feel that? After obliterating all three of these transformational myths culminate in the third movie of the third trilogy in the Star Wars series, as the young female Padawan Rey triumphs over Palpatine, who, like Voldemort and Sauron, was an evil that had survived death. I am all the Sith, Palpatine says, and I am all the Jedi, Rey roars. After obliterating Palpatine, Rey takes the name Skywalker, and in possession of both Luke and Leia's lightsabers, she walks into the future to generate new legends for a new world. Don't close yourself off, or your children off, or your friends off, or your loved ones off from the power of these great transformative myths. They are part of the great shift. Even though, just to close, even though Secret Injin explores many rich and deep issues related to primal reality and the arc of human evolution, more than anything, it's called action and a warning about three deadlines. 2022, we're here. We're in the year 2022. 2024, I'm of course referring to the national elections and the midterm elections in 2022 and the presidential election in 2024. And the third deadline is the planetary deadline, I say 10 years, which is now 9 years, to do something meaningful, to take measures sweeping enough to mitigate the impact of the planetary climate crisis. The climate that civilization itself is predicated upon has collapsed because of our carbon footprint, because of our overpopulation, because of our consumption of too much meat, our burning of too much fossil fuel, all of it. It's us. Look up. So these three deadlines are hurtling upon us. I know you feel like you've been told over and over again every 2 years that this is the most important election cycle of your life and that the future of the republic hangs in the balance. Well, you're right. We have told you this every 2 years, and it has been true every time, and it is now. But we're running out of runway, finally. This is it. Some of us have spent our whole lives in this struggle. Some of us will never see the moment of final triumph, but it will come, and many of you who hear my voice now will be alive to see it, I hope. I didn't plan to become a mystical ward healer for the Democratic Party, but it's what is demanded of me in this era. Listen, politics is ugly, ugly and holy. Your vote is sacred. Don't commit sacrilege. Use your vote. Choose altruism. As your philosophy of governance. If you don't vote, if you're too cynical or you feel you're beyond the coarseness of politics, you are in effect voting for sociopathy as our philosophy of government. You're voting for sociopathy over altruism. In Secret Engine of the World, I wrote that my Yoda, the legendary American sage Joe Miller, called the power, I wrote about what he called the power of nothing. I wrote about his prophecy concerning this next 100 years. Well, we are halfway through that 100 years now. And poll after poll, election after election confirm his prophecy. Wave after wave of new voters entering into the body politic, are entering into the body politic, and they know, they just know. Some of you are warriors. By that I mean your life experience has shown you what it means, what is required of, what you are capable of to fight for freedom, or your freedom or someone else's freedom, or your life or someone else's life, or perhaps most desperately of all for your sanity or someone else's sanity. Others among you find yourselves in such circumstances and confronted with such challenges for the first time. No one alive has ever stood in a moment as dire as the one that we are in now. Even in the grim pit of World War II, there was clarity. There were lines that could advance and retreat in ways that could be grasped simply. This is all asymmetric. What we have now is all asymmetric, but we are in a chaos seemingly bottomless, a chaos utterly fraught with peril, a chaos that directly threatens not only our individual sanity, but our collective sanity. If you don't feel this way, well, you're living in a dream, in a bubble. And I don't envy you when that bubble bursts. You will be ill-equipped to come to grips with the impact of what is actually going on all around you. In Secret Engine, I document three great scourges of our time: the climate emergency, the global pandemic, and the rise of authoritarianism. There is a phase, the fog of war. These last 6 months or so, I've been turning that phrase over and over again in my mind. The fog of war. Oxford Dictionary defines it as confusion caused by chaos of war or battle. Yes, there is such a time in every great battle. Maybe it's a moment that feels like a day. Maybe it's a day that feels like a moment. You can't see ahead. You can't see behind. You can't see to either side. You dare not look up because in that moment you might be decapitated or disemboweled. All you have is your weapon and maybe your shield. All you can do is in that suspended time is meet what comes at you. All you can do is what you were last implored to do. If it was to advance, you advance. If it was to hold your ground, you hold your ground. We are all exhausted. We have all been horrified. What had hitherto been considered abominable has been normalized before your very eyes. In the throes of war, you can't kneel down and cast yarrow sticks, so I will give you the hexagram that applies to this moment. Number 29. The abysmal. A broken line, the abysmal. Again, this will all be in the script on wordsofpower.earth. The judgment, abysmal, repeated. If you are sincere, and you have success in your heart, and whatever you do succeeds. Water flows on interruptedly and reaches its goal. The image of the abysmal repeated. Thus, the superior human walks in lasting virtue and carries on the business of teaching. In times of great danger, the hexagram says, be like water. You just flow and you fill all the cracks as you flow forward. Just keep going. What are steps in these moments? What are the steps in this moment we must take? The list could be very long, but I'll just give you the three powerful, perhaps most powerful. The three most powerful. Do not underestimate the importance of these three steps. 1, vote. Vote the Democratic ticket straight down the ballot. But right now, it's not enough to just say vote. I mean, check your registration, especially if you live in a red state. You don't want to go to the polling place or mail in your ballot and discover you've been wrongly purged through some voter suppression technique. Yes, it is happening now. And likewise, don't just vote, nudge, cajole, shame everyone to do the same, and organize, show up, make your voice heard, engage, educate, lead. 2, get vaccinated. And if you're vaccinated, get boosted. Keep up with wearing a mask and sensible social distancing, issuing your own personal mandates in your own life until this really has receded for good. And likewise, nudge, cajole, shame everyone you know to do the same. Engage, educate, lead. And finally, exercise deep self-care, whatever that is for you. Sleep, hydration, yoga, meditation, forest bathing, unplugging for your electronic devices for some time in the course of every 24-hour cycle, not just for sleeping. Know that this deep self-care is an evolutionary act, and likewise, nudge, cajole, shame everyone you know to do the same. Remind yourself every day and every night that you are not alone and that we are not alone, and that we are surfing the crest of a great wave, that we are riding the arc of human evolution. Remind yourself every day and every night of the power of nothing. Remind yourself every day and every night of the legendary American sage Joe Miller's 100-year prophecy. These are powerful, all-powerful forces. But there's something more, something incomprehensible and unspeakable. The power of Gaia itself, herself, the divine intelligence herself, within which we all literally move and live and have our beings. She wants the human species to right itself. She wants us to emerge from this singularity, new, better, saner, kinder, wiser versions of ourselves. Yes, of course, if we lose ourselves, if we succumb in the fog of war, if we give up, she will deal with us mercilessly and summarily for the sake of countless other species and the future of her laboratory. But we have a chance. Hence the 3 deadlines I've articulated. And we are in it now. I've spoken for a long time. I hope this recorded properly. I will end it now with a moment of peaceful breath into the heart with unconditional love flowing out for all. Sarvasiti Karshandi. May the Vajra, the heart, be realized in this lifetime. Shabbat.